what I always advise the clients I work with is that the best thing to do for them in terms of in their professional life is to look for a job or position themselves for a job that fulfills their life mission. And of course, together, we, in most cases, also I help them with finding their mission, identifying it and verbalizing it in 1 or 2 sentences. And then as a next step is, okay, let's see what is the sort of sector, company, or role in which you would be closer to fulfilling that mission. If not, maybe through an entrepreneurship endeavor, which is also always an option.
Welcome to the Group Lot podcast. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you again for having me. And best regards from Brussels, Belgium, which is a bit rainy today.
Wonderful. It's a bit cloudy in the UK today as well. Hopefully we get that sun we're looking for.
Exactly. Looking forward to some sun and for summer to come.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, so we'll just jump right into it. Who is David? What do you do? Can we meet you?
Sure. So, David, in a nutshell, I like to consider myself, a man of many hats, and it's usually for me quite a challenge to introduce myself at events or in roundtables I'm part of, because I wear multiple hats and have been wearing multiple hats for some time. The common thread I found, though, that connects all these different hats and roles I have is my mission in life is to prepare people for the future of work, and especially for a future of work which is increasingly more disrupted or augmented by technology, in particular AI. So that's my mission, and everything I do is connected to this mission.
Wonderful. How did you get to the point where you even know the mission for your life? Because I feel a lot of people, I think we just live day to day, right? This works for me, this doesn't. There is no concrete mission why we do what we do. So how did you even get to that point where you figured out what you really wanted?
Yeah, I'm in no way an exception. For me, it was also a matter of discovery more in hindsight, as Steve Jobs would have said, connecting the dots looking backward, meaning that I've been working in this reskilling and preparing people for work and life in general space for many years, but it took me time for reflection more than just action to realize how the dots connected under this bigger future of work umbrella. And when this, in the last few years, when the generative AI boom started, I was sort of in a prime position to kind of bring up to light even more of the research I've been doing or the talks I've been given to both companies and public sector entities. But yeah, again, to answer your question, it was all a matter of taking time to reflect and connecting the dots looking backward, because I didn't know at the time, 10 years ago, when I was doing voluntarily trainings for friends, for family members who wanted to learn a new skill, that will eventually lead me to be in this space and to provide value to so many other people than just close friends and family. So it was an ongoing process.
Indeed, and we can all see the value you're adding through your drive and initiative. Let's talk future of work. What are your perspectives? What will
Yeah,
work look like in the future?
it's a great question, and one that has potentially multiple answers. I'm an optimist myself, so I see the future of work being both disrupted, of course, by these technologies, but I'm looking at the full half of the glass, meaning that there's a lot of potential for AI to augment the work we do, to help us really in the more tedious and repetitive parts of our work. What I don't see, though, enough happening at the moment is companies, governments, and even individuals themselves doing enough of the upskilling and reskilling that will need to take place, because in order to fully benefit from AI, we need to learn how to use these tools, and they develop and evolve so fast that it's very hard, even for the leading tech companies that are developing these technologies, to even train their employees. Because I have friends across the big tech companies and also the startups, and when I ask them, how much you're being trained, in using these tools, many of them are also, not yet fully upskilled and reskilled, which just gives you a glimpse into what the key to this positive future will look like of the future of work, which is one in which more from an individual level to a government and private sector level, there's more reskilling done to teach people how to use these tools, because otherwise the tools will more automate than augment if we don't know how to use them. So that's how I see it. I think there's still the sort of end of the story is still to be determined based on the actions we take today. And we still have some time left, but we definitely need to double down on the reskilling and upskilling that we currently do.
And what do you think is the barrier currently to that drive from organizations, governments to upskill and reskill people with the technology, which we all see is going to be very essential to the future of work?
First and foremost, for all sectors and entities, the main challenge is the speed at which this technology evolves, because, you know, as much as the tools since the launch of ChatGPT are you know, large language model power tools are still very much doing the same things. You know, you're prompting a chatbot that provides you answers to different queries, but they're developing very fast with new features and so on. So the speed of technological advancement is the first challenge. And then the other challenges are down to each sector. For the public sector is the initial and original, so the traditional resistance to change, and how it is more difficult for a government or a ministry to upskill its employees. That's to do with just how systems work and how governments work, that there, as I said, more resistance to change, and that many of the people working in the public sector in different governments around the world have, as they say, jobs for life. They're very sort of comfortable in their position, so maybe they're less keen to learn new skills than others. In the private sector, it's a companies' desire to ultimately increase productivity and profits. And as much as we sometimes don't like to admit, companies will, in most cases, prioritize profits over people, unfortunately, which means that if a software can do the job better with less cost, the company will hurry to implement it, whilst the priority of upskilling or reskilling their own employees might fall on the second place if, you know, that those sort of return on investments of those reskilling and upskilling programs are not clear enough. And at the NGO sector, it's again the typical challenges of the NGO sector. So both funding, not having enough funding to potentially pay for a trainer to upskill or reskill current activists, part of an NGO, and also governmental support potentially that can play a bigger role in this funding. So these are some of the challenges, but at the same time, I see there's a lot of optimism going forward. Google has launched the AI Opportunity Fund that is providing funding for NGOs and activists that are willing to upskill not just their own staff, but society. There's obviously on the governmental side, different initiatives, such as I think the Government AI Campus of Apolitical Foundation, which is intended at teaching civil servants around the world via an online free platform, AI-related skills, and to sort of give them a good context of what AI provides as opportunity, but also at risks. So there's things happening. The question remains, are these implemented fast enough or not? And only history will judge us and provide clear answers.
I'm almost tempted to ask, how do we assess the level of reskilling after putting in some of these strategies like you mentioned? How do we then know that people are really learning these skills, even with the available resources that they have? Is there a way to track? Is there a way to measure?
Yeah, I mean, there's of course AI-powered monitoring tools, which as much as in some
Okay.
cases, obviously there's some privacy issues to them, but there's definitely multiple ways for a company to measure if an employee is using a certain AI-powered tool by just obviously having corporate laptops that they use and using the tools that they are allowed to use by the company. So there's ways to measure for sure if they use it. Now, in terms of how they use it and how productively they use it, that's maybe a bit harder to measure. But there's definitely ways around it, and there's more done on the data analytics side by different companies that enable measurement of performance than in previous years. So I think measurement of using these tools is not as difficult. In general, measurement of reskilling outputs and how much people use skills they learn into a new job, and if they use those skills to find a new job, that's maybe some area of improvement. And the NGO I work for, Generation, is really differentiating itself from other NGOs by not just reskilling people, but also preparing them for new employment. That's our mission, providing economic mobility to people. And to be honest, there's not as many NGOs that focus not just on reskilling, which is important,
Mm.
but actually providing the follow-up to the people. Because let's be honest, most people who would go for a reskilling program or an upskilling program, at the end of it, they might come with a certificate, with a diploma, with some skills they've learned, but it might be months or in some cases even years until they can put those skills to the test, unless they're helped by maybe the same entity or another entity to leverage those skills as soon as possible post-training. So that's where maybe the gap is still there, and there's more work to be done to bridge that gap between a reskilling program and actually the company or the opportunity for which you can put those skills to the test.
Very good points you've raised. Now let's look at individuals, because some people might not have organizations where this skill is being utilized, like you said. How can they position themselves? How can they get that necessary upskilling? Because if it's the future of work, it's only a matter of time. If you don't have that skill, then it will affect your work. So how do they position themselves to make sure they're constantly reskilled and upskilled to to gain some of this new or learn how to use these tools?
Yeah, surprisingly enough, there's been research conducted by Salesforce, global research they've done, which actually showed that even at the moment, as we speak, there's actually individuals are faster in trying these tools out than are companies or governments
Mm.
ready to put together, training opportunities for them. So I think as long as you have now a laptop or a phone and a connection to the internet, most people have tried to interact with these tools in some shape or form. The challenge is obviously they've been potentially using tools that are not fully approved by their company, or that there's no sort of a clear process in place for how they can use them also for work. But I think at an individual level, I really like to see that there's a lot of people who are more and more jumping on the bandwagon of continuous learning and realizing that if they wait for their employer to train them or for a governmental scheme to do it, they're probably going to have to wait a bit longer. So it's really encouraging for me to see such studies that pinpoint to the fact that people are taking matters into their own hands. And I think as at this stage, as I said, as long as you provide people with the opportunity to have a laptop and internet, there's probably a high chance that they will try these tools, especially as they proliferate in the coming months and years. And as much as big tech companies have provided already, there's a lot of room, as I said, for academia, for other maybe NGOs to provide more of these free trainings as much as possible to people around the world, both young and old, to make sure that on top of the self-learning they do, which is already, I think, valuable, they also have some sort of structured training that they benefit from to make sure that there's quality output at the end. Because as I said, the risk of doing self-learning is that potentially if there's no follow-up at the end or no clear guidance, you might not know how to translate those skills into the real work life or workplace. So there's still use for structured training offerings. But yeah, it's down to individuals again to answer your question. And I've already see good trends that individuals are learning themselves how to use AI conversational tools, and we'll hopefully continue to try out all the new features that the big tech companies and tech startups are putting together, because there's now new features every other month, as we've seen. So there's a lot to digest for people, not just the people in the tech space, but people like you and I who are working outside of it as well.
Yeah, indeed. I watched the OpenAI Spring update where they launched the GPT 4.0, and the amazing features that come with them. They are becoming more real, more intelligent, right? Now there are so many tools out there, and not to be specific on a particular tool, but there might be this tendency for people trying to learn this one, learn that one, and end up not mastering even the act of prompting, for example. And that's where that structured learning you mentioned, how they come about. Now, for someone who is not hasn't even looked into this, you are in a business function where you interact more with people than with laptops and all of that. How can we? How can they bring AI into what they do? Is it even relevant? Are there people who would not need AI in their job in the future?
Yeah, there's the definitely a big part of the population who's doing manual labor, physical jobs who will not need AI, and we still need electrician. We still need people who are, supporting us with manual work, not just in factories and in warehouses where indeed some of the jobs are being automated, but elsewhere there's still the need for handicraft men and women in the world. And actually, the green economy, which is one of the fastest growing parts of the economy, needs a lot of people who know how to physically install a solar panel or be a technician repairing a wind turbine. This is not something a robot will do anytime too soon, be it with or without generative AI. So there will still be a need for that. But going back to the first part of your question with prompt engineering, and I actually deliver for those following who are interested, a prompt engineering 101 training, which is a half an hour crash course of the basic things you need to know to improve your prompting. Because funny enough, many of the AI conversational tools have been rightfully so accused of hallucinations because they're not perfect.
Yeah.
You can decrease the number of potentially fictitious answers you would get from a ChatGPT or a Gemini by just improving the way you prompt. And by doing so, you're not just getting more, and better output from these tools, but you're learning how to ask better questions in real life. So there's actually one concrete transferable skills AI conversational chatbots can teach us, which is how to ask better questions. Another thing, which is a positive coming out of this AI revolution, is that it's forcing us, all of us, to really re-examine what makes us human. What are the skills that are going to be harder to automate and sort of replicate in the coming years by an AI-powered software or hardware? And those are still the people skills that have been relevant for centuries: communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking. The four C's, as I like to call them, these are still going to be relevant, and we'll still need to work with people. And those will have, the better levels in these skills will still differentiate themselves. Even more so at the time in which AI will do an increasing part of the more numerical data crunching, data interpretation part of our jobs, for the better, because obviously most of us will like to delegate that part of the work to an entity like a AI, an AI powered software. So focus on people skills, and still for those interested pursuing a manual job, which is, as I said, beyond the electrician and maybe a landscape artist. There's still jobs in the green economy which are growing very fast, which are increasingly paying attractive salaries and providing the benefits that maybe historically they haven't. So there's plenty of opportunity that are not directly connected with AI, and those jobs are up for grabs because people are maybe not as well aware of them. And I'm referring here especially to the green economy opportunities.
Oh, you mentioned the four C's: collaboration, communication, creative thinking. What was the last one? I think I missed
Critical
the
thinking
last
and
one.
creativity.
Creativity, right? Yeah, and those skills, they will transcend machines, AI. We need them. We've always needed them, and we still need them to keep going. Um, okay, so also in terms of being very strategic with how people position themselves for good jobs, right? Building the skills is one of them. Are there other things people can do to make sure that not only do they have the skills, but they are in the right place where their skill is needed so that they can get those jobs? Because I feel some people have knowledge, the right things, but like you said, if you can't use these skills daily, there's a tendency you won't even be very good at it. So how do they position themselves after gaining a lot of knowledge to get the right job, the right fit for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't think there's one answer to it.
Yeah.
I'm also a career coach, and what I always advise the clients I work with is that the best thing to do for them in terms of in their professional life is to look for a job or position themselves for a job that fulfills their life mission. And of course, together, we in most cases also I help them with finding their mission, identifying it and verbalizing it in one or two sentences. And then as a next step is, okay, let's see what is the sort of sector, company, or role in which you would be closer to fulfilling that mission. If not, maybe through an entrepreneurship endeavor, which is also always an option. That being said, what you mentioned, you might be actually in a role or in a company or an organization that you're fulfilling your mission through, but you might learn AI to a level that you are not fulfilling in your current role as much as you still feel the job is providing you with not just an income, but a way to fulfill your mission. There's no reason not to leverage those skills and that interest that you have maybe in AI elsewhere, being initially as a volunteer, to test your skills, to maybe put them to good use for a good cause. And that's how I started, my future work related public speaking engagements were initially for NGOs, for think tanks, for entities that were not, providing me a remuneration. They were not paying me for
Yeah.
delivering these. They were just sort of trying to benefit from my knowledge. And I was lucky enough and grateful enough to have the chance to share these insights with them. And yeah, long story short, I think if you have a skill that is not fully leveraged in your current workplace, it doesn't mean you have to look for another job. If that job still ticks all the boxes when it comes to providing you with a decent income and a way to fulfill your mission, which I think are important criteria, and the flexibility, of course, to do something else on the side, to still have time for a hobby or, of course, for your family,
Yeah.
then use that part of that extra time to see if you can leverage those skills elsewhere, pro bono initially, and maybe in the future, if you develop your personal brand and your skill set, if you continue
Yeah.
to grow, potentially you can make a side hustle out of it. Because if there's one thing that can prepare us for the future of work, on top of learning skills and continuously preparing ourselves and acquiring new knowledge, is to have a side hustle, to have multiple hats. What I'm doing myself, it's obviously mainly an interest and a passion that I'm doing this speaking engagements, career coaching, and training and so on. But part of it is also me doing what I preach, which is
Yeah.
making sure I have multiple hats that can provide me with an income and a source of meaning in case one of them disappears or is being disrupted dramatically by a new technology or by God knows what's going to come. So having a side hustle, which can initially be a hobby, you put energy and resources in time, is something that could also prepare you for the future of work. Speaking of my mission and what I do with career coaching and so on. So I hope I answered your question.
Spot on. And I'm just smiling because I can relate with putting your hobby into test, right? Volunteering. Podcasting, for example, and talking about this, it's something I enjoy doing, right? And I can see beyond anything, I think there's a fulfillment that comes with being able to do something that you truly feel is making an impact. Right, so I'll just say keep going and keep inspiring everyone. It's really wonderful.
Likewise, you pursuing your interests with this podcast is both at the personal level, I'm sure, very rewarding, and indeed, it's a source of
Yeah,
inspiration for others to try to make time for these interests that might not pay. You might have to
yeah,
dedicate it time and energy, but that comes as a return on investment years forward, in which you might be able to do this full time if that's something you want to pursue, if you put the
yeah.
time and energy into it. So yeah.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, so let's look into a future that is not just AI generated, AI driven. I know AI will be at the core of it. I know technology will be at the core of it. We've talked about people's skills as well. Um, but just thinking is in the far future where AI helps us do a lot more things. What do you think life will be like? Let's be creative. Let's play with our imaginations. What do you
Uh,
think life will be like?
I personally think as much as technology evolves very fast, again, we're all still human, and humans have a fairly traditional, I would say, or historically known resistance to change. So whilst these tools are being developed very fast, I still think the impact they will have, at least at an individual level, will maybe not be as immediate as some would expect. At an organizational level, we're already seeing it. Companies adopting these tools and increasing already the productivity of their employees and their bottom lines. But at the societal level and at the individual level, maybe the impact will be not as immediate. However, I see, as I said, I'm a tech optimist. I see a future which is more towards the utopian look of these tools if implemented wisely with human at their center and with the right sort of skilling programs in place for people to know how to leverage these tools. They will lead hopefully to a society in which we will have more time to pursue our side hustles and to do, maybe podcasts one day a week, because that's what the kindles our fire and gives us the motivation we need to work very hard for the employer
Yeah,
we have for the other 3 or 4 days a week, and to have more time for that, to pursue our interest and to spend more time with our family. So in other words, I do believe in this future in which AI will augment some of the tedious work that we have, and the time that we will win, sorry, will hopefully be used by us to pursue meaningful things that will elevate us as individuals and also society. And as I said, I still think this future is up for us to decide. We're still at the early phase of generative AI, definitely, and even AI,
Yeah.
as much as it has been a topic that has been discussed, for decades now. But we're still at the outset of what AI will look like and how it will impact society. And I think it's still down to us to make sure it's more towards a utopian scenario that I described,
Mm.
in which we're more empowered to pursue the things that make us more human, as opposed to automate the things that that we cherish and that bring us positivity into our lives. So that's the sort of future I see, a positive one, and I really hope for it.
Same here. I really hope for that as well. Maybe finally, responsible AI, right? We can't talk about AI without that responsibility perspective. How should we approach it? How should we be responsible and make sure we're safe? How can we ensure that we're responsible and safe while using AI?
And it's a good question. It's the level of action needed to be taken is down to each sort of entity involved. So first and foremost, the companies designing these tools, which are actually a small group of leading big tech companies and a few startups that are focused on AI, they have to make sure they take into account AI ethics, responsibility in the design of these tools, and have a human-centered approach. Then there's the role of regulators who have to make sure they keep the companies accountable to have these checks and balances in place. And if they don't, to obviously make them reconsider their actions. And there is some worrying signs happening now in the AI space of different people working in the AI responsibility space more broadly, and alignment in particular, who've resigned from different important positions they had or were fired, which are worrying signs. But I hope at the end of the day that responsibility will still remain or the priority of these companies. So governments took the role to regulate, and then at the end of the day, for each of us as citizens to make sure we hold the companies responsible, and to try as much as possible to use our critical thinking in the way we both implement these tools in our daily lives, and if we see things that are not as they should, to report them, to make sure that we keep the tech companies accountable, because at this stage we really depend in many ways on them, and the job of the regulators to keep the development AI in the responsible human-centered approach we would all want, I presume.
Right. Just spot on. So the companies developing, government, individuals using, we all have to come together to make sure we use things responsibly and
Exactly.
the right way. Thank you, and it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you for making our time for this discussion. How can people reach you? How can they uh, learn more from what you're doing?
Yes, thank you again for the invitation. So I'm David Timis on LinkedIn, and I'm fairly active there. So reach out, connect. Let's have a conversation. I post on the topic of AI and its impact on work and society in general for many years before it was trendy. And yeah, I would love to connect with you, and you can find me there. And to you, William, again, I wish you good luck with the podcast, and to
You.
keep kindling your passion, because it will take you places.
Thank you so much, and thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. All the best from Brussels.